Hey guys, welcome back to the channel, and in today's video I wanted to analyse the career of Philippe Coutinho and try to understand his downfall from being the biggest Premier League sale of all time to being a free agent at under 35 when he was once considered one of the best players and one of the highest potential players. How did he get here? And to start this off, a lot of people forget where his career actually started, and it was at a relatively big club with Inter Milan. Now, at Inter, I've looked and his stats were not that great, but obviously he wasn't a flop at Inter because he was sold for a decent fee to Liverpool and he was just a youngster. But one thing that people try to associate with attacking type of players is that stats are the only thing that matters. And with Coutinho, he was never really a stats merchant. Yes, in his peak seasons, he got a lot of stats, but he was never, his overall stats aren't that great. He's not a goals and assists type of guy. He's more of a playmaker, and that's the thing with Coutinho. So at Inter, in 53 games in the Serie A, he only got 5 goals and 6 assists, which isn't terrible, but it's definitely not great looking. But he obviously was good for Inter Milan, but he was just a youngster. Liverpool took a small risk getting him, but at Liverpool, we all know he was a major success, and this is how a superstar was made. At Liverpool, people seem to forget that Liverpool also was not the club they are today. Liverpool, although having a history of being an iconic club, were a consistent Europa League level team, and during that era before Klopp, they were at their worst. Just before Klopp, and Coutinho seemed to be the only person doing anything. Now, the thing is, when Klopp came in, Coutinho played under Klopp, and he was brilliant. And at the start, Klopp was starting his project and implementing players that he wanted. But quickly, offers started coming in for Coutinho. In his last season for Liverpool, he was absolutely insane. And they didn't want to sell Coutinho. It was made very clear. Klopp said he didn't want to sell Coutinho, and the fans said they loved Coutinho. But unfortunately, when it comes to players like this level, there's a certain fee where you just can't refuse it. And Barcelona were on a run of crazy transfers, and they offered a record-breaking 120 million for Philippe Coutinho. And none of the fans or Jurgen Klopp rejected that. Like, you're not going to reject that. That's a crazy fee. And looking back for Liverpool, it was an absolutely brilliant decision. They put that money into absolute brilliant transfers, getting the likes of Salah and Alisson with that money directly. And obviously, they're legends for the club, bigger legends than Coutinho ever was. So, in the end, it was a brilliant decision for Liverpool as a club, but was it the right decision for Coutinho? Because this is where a lot of people associate the start of the downfall. And I don't disagree with that when I say that. The only thing is that I don't know if Coutinho was as bad for Barcelona as people say. At Barcelona, and let me just set the scene here. Barcelona were at the worst stage of their club's history that in the last 100 years. The Bartomeu era, which was their club president, and the Ronald Koeman as the manager, was an absolute terrible era for Barcelona, and they wasted so much money, and they're still, in 2026, recovering from that still. So that's just to set the scene of how much an effect. The worst decision Barca ever made was selling Neymar for 222 million, the biggest transfer of all time, which set them signing Coutinho and Dembele and Antoine Griezmann. All those transfers combined were above 300 million, all just to replace one player, Neymar. So, non like Liverpool, Barcelona couldn't reinvest their money intelligently. Now, Coutinho, honestly, in his first season with Barca, when I was doing research for this video, it shocked me how well this guy did for Barca at the start. So to set the scene, in his last season for Liverpool, he played the first half of the season for them and scored 7 goals and 7 assists in 14 games, which means he got a goal contribution every game he played for Liverpool. But then he went to Barcelona, and for Barcelona, in 18 games, got 7 goals and 6 assists in 18 games. 13 goal contributions in 18 games is not just bad, not just good, it's great. And take into account that they had Messi and Luis Suarez at the time who were taking up the goal contributions as well. So it's nearly more impressive what he did at Barca in that season than Liverpool in that season. Not to mention in the Champions League in 5 games he got 5 goals and 2 assists, which is 7 goal contributions, which is more goal contributions in games in Champions League. So this guy was absolutely insane. And it's weird to me because people associate like the second he goes to Barca he was a flop. He was an absolute success. He was actually living up to the 120 million price tag. Although I don't think he ever lived up to that, and that's not even a hot take, but signs were being set here for a good transfer. But the thing is, I remember back then, and fans were associating Coutinho with a flop already. To be fair, Barca were in a bad stage. Now, that's not Coutinho's fault, but Barca were in a bad stage. They weren't getting the league points, they weren't getting the silverware, and Bartomeu was getting a lot of hate, and Ronald Koeman was an absolutely terrible manager, one of the worst managers in Barcelona's history. But Coutinho went into the next season, and unfortunately for Coutinho, he did bad. He was already getting criticism when he was doing good because he was 120 million, and now he was getting so much criticism because he was doing bad. In 34 games in La Liga, only getting 5 goals and 2 assists, 7 goal contributions is obviously terrible. Now, it was a bit better in the Champions League. He seems to always be brilliant in the Champions League with 3 goals and 3 assists in 12 games. That's actually pretty good, even in that season. That's pretty good. But unfortunately for Coutinho, that season killed his career. And I'm not even exaggerating when I say literally that season killed his career. And that's the thing with Barca, is that he was always walking on ice. Like, the thing is, after that season, which you would associate, to summarize, this guy had one insane season for Barca and one shit season for Barca. And you would think, okay, well, you'll give him another season. He was on loan to Bayern Munich. And at Bayern Munich, where he was written off, and honestly, the Bayern Munich transfer was not expected to do well. And this guy was benched at Bayern Munich, but still did insane for them, getting in the Bundesliga 8 goals and 6 assists, which is 14 goal contributions in 23 games, and in the Champions League getting 3 goals and 3 assists in 11 games, and he was a sub. So that just makes it even more impressive. He scored 2 goals against Barca in their infamous game 8-2, which was the perfect karma. I also think he scored in the Champions League final for Bayern Munich. So he was a very impactful player for Bayern. But it was already weird that they loaned him in when they were benching him. He was too good of a player to bench. Bayern were in their best season ever, and they decided at the end of the season not to sign him, which kind of made sense for Bayern. But like, he did well, and usually successful loans go to transfers, and Coutinho wouldn't have went for too much. Now, I don't know how much Barca were demanding, but his wages were probably a lot. But then he went back to Barca, and unfortunately, he didn't set the world on fire when he came back to Barca. He started to go slow down, and he was gone. Literally, he was gone in less than a season because he couldn't set the scene with Barca. Barca kind of felt the need to give him a chance, and they were probably struggling to get a transfer when he came back from Bayern, but they just gave up on him in a season. And that was the sad thing with Philippe Coutinho, is that his Barca time people associate with one of the biggest flops of all time, but him as a player actually didn't do too bad. And I think most of it was on Barca, but we'll get back to that. The next thing in his transfer was to Aston Villa. A weird transfer, a bit too small for him, but maybe they were the only ones offering. They sold him for 30 million, and at Aston Villa, he actually started off pretty good. And in his second season, he was still pretty good. And then in his third season for Aston Villa, he did quite bad, kind of dropping off. And then you think the same thing with Barcelona. Third season bad, give him another, gone to Qatar side. And that was, for me, the end of his career. Like, obviously, it's the end of his career, but that's basically his retirement. He went to a Brazilian club after that, and now he's a free agent. But this guy was still relatively young at Aston Villa. Yes, he was in his early 30s, but early 30s players can still play at the top level. So Philippe Coutinho, I kind of understand his decision. I usually give players hate for going to Saudi, but I kind of understand that this guy was so unlucky that he just kind of wanted to make his bank and then retire, because he knew that his career was on a ticking clock that was very much on the closing day. But the thing with Philippe Coutinho, compared to other players, I made a downfall video on Jadon Sancho, and I summarized it in one word: ego. And if I was to summarize the same word for Coutinho, it would be money. Now, I would say that even money wouldn't be like, Coutinho was money hungry, but nowhere as money hungry as people think. There was other players I know that are way more money hungry, but in reality, he should have never went to Barcelona. At the time, it made sense because lots of money, big name club. But Barcelona the cracks were already starting to show. He shouldn't have taken that risk. But look, it's a risk. But then he absolutely shouldn't have went to that Qatari club he went to after Aston Villa. I remember him at Aston Villa. Although nowhere as high rated as he was at Liverpool, this guy was still a decent baller. He could have started playing at a mid-table club and maybe built himself back up and maybe kept a bit of his status. But I get it, the money. But that's the one word I associate with Coutinho. Even though his money decisions weren't the stupidest decisions, he's not like João Felix going to Al Nassr at 24. I think with Coutinho, he's much more unlucky than other players. Jadon Sancho was much more his own biggest enemy. But with Coutinho, it was Barca. And Barca have so many victims with players like this. Antoine Griezmann, the exact same thing. But Barcelona killed his career. So when people call Coutinho a flop at Barcelona, I don't think it's his fault. He was pulling up the stats. Yes, he had one bad season, but people seem to think one bad season, player gone. Like, this guy had one bad season for Barca, which was bad, but not terrible. He was still great in the Champions League. Then they're like, loan him out, which isn't fair for one. They should have given him another season. Because to summarize, this guy had one elite season, like Ballon d'Or contention season, and then one bad season, which wasn't like absolutely horrendous, but bad season. It's not like loan him out then. It's like give him another shot. And maybe after the third season, we'll discuss a loan. But then not only that, when he's loaned, he does brilliant. But that loan club doesn't give him a chance. Bayern Munich never really gave him a chance. And then at Barca, they'd already accepted that he was going, even though he was already still showing that he was the same player at Bayern Munich. And then at Aston Villa, although not as good, was still decent, but he went to Saudi. Aston Villa was kind of the end of his career, to be fair. He dropped off his quality a lot. But Bayern Munich didn't treat him good enough. But to be honest, it just made no sense. He shouldn't have went to Bayern. Bayern were too good for him. And Barca, they were obviously the biggest enemy. And it's really unlucky. And again, he's just really, really unlucky. And I really feel bad for him. And I was shocked doing research how good this guy was for some of the clubs he played for. How good he was for Barca. Because when I hear it, I associate Coutinho with one of the biggest flops ever. And yes, he never made up his fee at Barca, but with the time he played pretty damn well. So with Coutinho, I really feel bad for him. And it's one player that is associated with a flop, and there's usually a life lesson. But even my one word with like money, I don't really say I can't see myself ever doing that. I see it as a sensible decision. So with Coutinho, it's really just unlucky and a really big fear of any player to end up like him, just going to the wrong club at the wrong time. It really is. I feel bad for Coutinho. So Coutinho, that was the downfall video. Really feel bad for him, and hopefully people remember him better than what he was being associated with in the last 2 years. But anyways, if you guys did enjoy that video, please consider liking it so I know you guys want to see more like this. And subscribe to my channel. We're closing in on 500 subscribers and I'm making daily content like this. And I want to continue this downfall series, and I love doing research into players like this. And yeah, that's pretty much it for today's video. I'll see you guys in the next one. Bye.